I think that we can gather from the earlier verses in 2 Corinthians chapter 10 that the super apostles did not only talk Paul down, but they boastfully talked themselves up. That's not the proper thing to do. We'll read about it in today's rather lengthy reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 12 to 18. For we dare not make ourselves of the number, or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, but they, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, are not wise. But we will not boast of things without our measure, but according to the measure of the rule which God hath distributed to us, a measure to reach even unto you. For we stretch not ourselves beyond our measure, as though we reached not unto you, for we are come as far as to you also in preaching the gospel of Christ, not boasting of things without our measure, that is, of other men's labours, but having hope, when your faith is increased, that we shall be enlarged by you according to our rule abundantly, to preach the gospel in the regions beyond you, and not to boast in another man's line of things made ready to our hand. But he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. For not he that commendeth himself is approved, but whom the Lord commendeth. I think we all know what it means to blow your own trumpet. It's when people talk boastfully about themselves and tend to exaggerate their virtues. I once heard a person say that people only blow their own trumpet because they are the only ones who know the tune. What you say about yourself is not what other people might say. When Paul writes about some that commend themselves in verse 12, he's referring to the super apostles, or the chiefest apostles of chapter 11, verse 5. It appears from these verses that they were keen to make themselves out to be better than others, even those in their own little group, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves, as he says again in verse 12. It reminds me of the spirit of the disciples when they debated among themselves who should be the greatest in Mark chapter 9, verse 34. Paul reminds us that this kind of activity is not wise in verse 12. It was certainly not what he did. We will not boast of things without our measure in verse 13. The super apostles made claims about themselves that were not justified by the facts. It appears that they might even have claimed credit for the work that other people had done, probably even for what Paul had done. Paul did not claim credit for other people's labours, not boasting of things without our measure, that is, of other men's labours, he writes in verse 15. He knew what work the Lord had given him to do. It included bringing the gospel to Corinth, the measure of the rule which God hath distributed to us, a measure to reach even unto you, in verse 13. But it also went beyond them, to preach the gospel in the regions beyond you, verse 16. Paul did not want to intrude into the work that others had done, and he certainly didn't want to take credit for it. In today's reading, we can learn the importance of knowing what our service for God is, as Paul did, and the need for humility in that service. It is not a good thing to be proud of the work that we do, nor is it right to talk it up as a way of making ourselves look important. We should not be blowing our own trumpets. We should always remember that it is not he that commendeth himself who is approved, but whom the Lord commendeth, verse 18. We need to seek the Lord's well done, good and faithful servant of Matthew 25, verse 23, rather than being engaged in marking our own homework, so to speak. And far better it would be if we used our voices to talk about a more worthy subject than ourselves. Paul finishes, he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord, verse 17. I hope that is what we want to do.